Arthur's Family Truth. 3 weeks after my daughter's engagement. I got a call I almost ignored. The woman on the line didn't explain much. She just said she had heard something at the party, something I don't think I was supposed to hear. Then she asked me to come alone and not tell my daughter. I didn't ask questions, I didn't react. I just said yes. At the time, nothing about that call felt like it would matter. Mr. Hargrove, this is Beverly Caldwell. I coordinated your daughter's engagement party at the Westbrook Hotel 3 weeks ago. I remembered her, mid-40s, organized, kept the whole evening running without a single visible problem. Lorraine would have liked her. Sure, Beverly, is there an issue with the invoice? No, sir, this isn't about payment. A pause. I need to see you in person today if at all possible. And please don't mention this call to Dana. My hand tightened on the phone. Outside the window, 2 of my guys were loading shingles onto a trailer. Normal Thursday, normal life. What's this about, Beverly? I can't explain over the phone. But I heard something at the party, something you need to know before the wedding. Can you meet me at my office downtown? Her voice was steady but carrying something heavy behind it. The voice of someone who'd been sitting on a secret and finally decided they couldn't anymore. I'll be there, I said. Beverly's office was on the 2nd floor of a small building near the Gulch, event planning firm, her name on the frosted glass door. She met me in the lobby and walked me straight through to a back room lined with fabric samples and laminated seating charts. She closed the door carefully and sat across from me, hands folded on the desk. I almost didn't call you, she said. I went back and forth for almost 3 weeks. But I kept asking myself, if this were my father, would I want someone to tell him? She looked at me directly. The answer was yes. Tell me what you heard. She reached into her desk drawer and pulled out her phone. The night of the party, I was doing final checks on the audio system for the toast speeches. My recorder was still running when I stepped near the terrace to check the speaker placement. The doors were partially open. She set the phone flat on the desk between us. Dana and her fiancé were outside. They didn't know I could hear them. She pressed play. At first, I didn't even process what I was hearing. It was my daughter's voice. Calm, casual, like she was talking about something that had already been decided. Then another voice, and a few words that didn't fit. Not with anything I thought I knew. I didn't stop the recording. I didn't say anything. I just sat there and listened all the way through. Roy's voice came next. Calm, controlled, the kind of voice that already knew how this was going to play out. Dana laughed. A light laugh, relaxed, the laugh of someone talking about a plan that was already working. He's so trusting, he already paid $35,000 for this party. Once the business sells, we're looking at $1.8 million minimum. And with the prenup structured right, whatever we have before the divorce stays separate. The sale money is ours. Divorce. I heard the word and something in my chest just went flat. I gripped the armrest of the chair. I was aware of doing it but couldn't stop. Scott has no idea either, Dana continued. He thinks he's going to get the business someday. Let him keep waiting around. By the time Dad figures any of this out, we'll already be gone. Easy payday. Beverly stopped the recording. The room was quiet. I could hear traffic outside. Somewhere in the building a phone was ringing. Easy payday. My daughter's voice saying those words about me, about everything I'd spent 34 years building, like it was just a number on a spreadsheet. There's about 4 minutes total, Beverly said quietly. They talk about the timeline, how to approach you about retiring, and at one point Roy mentions he already has a buyer lined up. A buyer already lined up before the engagement party, before the ring, maybe before they ever started dating. I asked her to send me the audio file. She typed on her phone there, and mine buzzed on the table. File received. Timestamp, location data, the whole thing. Mr. Hargrove? Beverly's voice was careful. I'm sorry this is the kind of news I had. I stood up slowly. My legs felt fine. Everything felt fine in the way that nothing actually was. You did the right thing, I said. Thank you. She walked me to the door. I drove home without remembering most of it. I sat in my home office that night until 2 in the morning. Just me, a legal pad, and a pot of coffee that went cold somewhere around midnight. I didn't notice. I started writing down everything I could remember. Dates, amounts, conversations, things I'd written off as normal at the time. Things that suddenly looked completely different with fresh eyes. The engagement party, $35,000, cash only, Dana had insisted. We're starting fresh, Dad. Cash is just more practical. I'd thought she was being sensible. Mature, even. I'd been proud of her for it. The past year of loans and help. Her car payment, when she said she'd had a rough few months at work, $4,200 credit card debt she said had built up before she met Roy, $7,800. A business investment opportunity Roy had brought to me over dinner one evening, confident and polished, something about a real estate partnership in Brentwood. I'd written a check for $10,000, never saw a return, never got a straight answer about what happened to it. That was another $10,000 gone. Add the smaller things, grocery runs I'd made for them, the car registration I'd covered, the weekend they forgot their wallets at a nice restaurant downtown. At minimum, another $3,000 to $4,000 scattered across 12 months. Total for Dana, somewhere north of $22,000 on top of the $35,000 party. Nearly $60,000 if I counted every dollar. Then there was Scott. My son had moved back home 3 years ago after his food truck went under. He'd sunk everything into it, or said he had, and when it failed he showed up at my door with 2 bags and a look on his face like a man who'd just lost a coin flip, not someone who'd made a series of bad decisions over 18 months. Temporary, he said, just until he got back on his feet. 6 months after that, his girlfriend Brenda arrived. More bags. No conversation about it, just suddenly she was there. I'd never set a timeline, never asked for rent. Kept telling myself it was family, it was temporary, it was what Lorraine would have wanted, take care of the kids. But Lorraine was sharper than me about these things. She would have had a timeline set by week 2. I sat there at my desk doing the math I'd been avoiding for 3 years. Utilities and groceries alone, roughly $800 a month with 2 extra people in the house. Car insurance for Scott still on my policy, $180 a month. The $1,500 I'd given him just to help when he was looking at apartments, then he didn't end up getting one. The $900 Brenda had borrowed to cover a medical bill, never repaid. Small amounts that added up to something that wasn't small at all. 36 months. Roughly 1,400 on 100 400 on 400 on 400 under 100 on 400 on $300 to Dana. 50,000 keeping Scott and Brenda comfortable in my house. Over $107,000, and Roy already had a buyer lined up for a $1.8 million business. I'd been funding my own destruction, and I'd been smiling while I did it. By the time I put the pen down, it was nearly 3 a.m., 11 pages of notes. I opened my laptop and searched Asset Protection Attorney Nashville and found Patricia Lawson, Estate Planning, Business Protection, Trust Creation. Good reviews. And opening at 9 a.m., I made the appointment and went to bed. Didn't sleep much. Patricia Lawson's office was on the 14th floor of a building on Church Street. She came in at exactly 900, mid-50s, no wasted movement, firm handshake. "Tell me what's happening," she said. I told her everything, played her the recording, walked her through all 11 pages of notes. Explained about Scott and Brenda, the 3 years of slow drain. Explained about Dana and Roy, the $35,000 party, the loans, the recorded plan to sell my business and leave. She listened without interrupting once. When I finished, she set down her pen and looked at me. "You're not the first person I've seen in this chair with this kind of story," she said. "But you're doing exactly the right thing by coming now before the wedding. Can they actually get the business? Not if we move quickly. Right now, your business, your house, your savings accounts, all of it is reachable. We need to change that today." She walked me through an irrevocable trust, transfer the assets in. I maintain full control while I'm alive, but distribution after my death follows my exact written instructions. No challenges, no manipulation. No room for anyone to claim they were owed something I never intended to give. "Your children receive whatever you specify," Patricia said. "Minimum required by Tennessee law, maximum. Or nothing beyond the legal floor. That's entirely your decision." I thought about Dana laughing on that recording. He's so trusting. "Let's protect everything," I said. The fee was $10,000. I'd spent $35,000 on a party built around a plan to steal from me. $10,000 to lock the door felt like the most straightforward transaction I'd made in years. We spent 2 hours on documents. Signing, initialing, structuring, the business transferred to trust management. The house, investment accounts, retirement funds. Everything with a value got a wall around it. Patricia handed me 2 sealed envelopes at the end of the meeting. Eviction notices, one for Scott, one for Brenda. Serve them personally, she said. That way there's no question of receipt. 30-day clock starts from delivery. I took the envelopes, held them for a moment. Mr. Hargrove, she paused at the door. What you're about to do will very likely end your relationship with both your children permanently. I want you to understand that going in. I looked down at the envelopes. They made that decision, I said. I'm just making it official. The next 2 weeks I really watched the way you do when the filter comes off. Scott was up by noon on a good day. Afternoons on my couch, phone in hand, some video running at full volume. Every time he spoke to me, it circled back to money. There was a trip to Destin he and Brenda wanted to take. Could I cover $1,800 for the rental? His truck needed new brake pads and he was a little short. Nothing major, just $400. Could I transfer it over? Brenda moved through my house like it had always been hers. Ate my food, used my laundry, borrowed my truck once, without asking, and brought it back with an empty tank. In 3 years, she had never once, not once, said thank you for anything. Dana called twice during those 2 weeks, both times about wedding expenses. First call. Dad, the florist needs a deposit, $8,000. Can you wire it by Friday? I told her I'd think about it. She got quiet the way she did when she expected a yes and didn't get one. Second call, Roy found the perfect venue for the rehearsal dinner. $12,000, but honestly, it's such a deal for what you get. I told her I'd think about it. Same silence. Then Roy called, friendly, casual. Like we talked every week. Hey Glenn, just wanted to check in. You ever think about slowing down? I mean, Nashville market is absolutely on fire right now. If you ever had any interest in selling Hargrove Roofing, finding the right buyer at the right time could set you up really well for retirement. I could probably help you with that if you wanted. There it was, laid out right in front of me. I'll keep it in mind, I said. Family helps. Family, Roy said. I hung up and added the call to my notes. Date, time, exact wording. Everything Patricia might need. Day 14, she called to confirm. Trust finalized. Assets protected. All of it locked. That evening I picked up the 2 envelopes and walked out of my office. Scott and Brenda were in the living room when I walked in. He was on the couch, she was on the armchair with her feet tucked under her, both of them scrolling their phones. The TV was on with nobody watching it. I set both envelopes on the coffee table and stepped back. Scott looked at the envelopes, then at me. Something shifted in his face. What's this? Official eviction notice. You have 30 days to find other housing, both of you. Brenda looked up from her phone, laughed once, short and sharp. You're joking. I'm not. Scott picked up his envelope and tore it open. I watched his face go from confused to pale as he read down the page. You can't be serious. He looked up. I'm your son. You're a 34-year-old man who has lived in my house for 3 years without paying rent, without contributing anything, and without any plan to change that. That's not something I'm willing to keep supporting. Brenda stood up, hands on her hips. Where are we supposed to go? You can't just throw us out. You have 30 days. That's enough time to find an apartment. Scott threw the paper down on the cushion beside him. This is about Dana, isn't it? She gets everything and I'm the one who gets kicked out. You've always done this. She's always the one who gets taken care of. This has nothing to do with your sister. He stepped toward me, chest up, voice louder now. You're punishing me for something she did. That's what this is. I held his gaze and didn't move. 30 days, Scott. I'd start looking tomorrow morning. Brenda's voice went cold behind him. Everyone is going to know what kind of father you are. You realize that? I turned and walked back to my office, closed the door, locked it. Behind me, I heard it all start up, Scott's voice rising, something hitting the wall, Brenda crying in that loud way that's more anger than hurt. 30 minutes later, I could hear him on the phone, voice carrying through the hallway. Dana, you need to come over. Dad's lost his mind. He gave us eviction papers. I'm serious. Bring Roy. A pause. I don't know what set him off. Just come tomorrow. We need to figure this out together. I opened a new audio file on my phone and set it on the desk recording. Documented everything, the time, their exact words, the threat Brenda made, everything Patricia might need if this ended up in front of a judge. Then I sat back and waited for Saturday. Dana's car pulled into the driveway at 10 in the morning. Roy got out first, adjusted his jacket. looked at the house the way a man looks at something he's already decided belongs to him. Dana came around from the passenger side, face arranged into the concerned daughter expression I'd seen her use since she was 19 years old. They came in without knocking. I gave them 20 minutes in the living room with Scott and Brenda. Low voices, urgent, a plan being assembled. I stood at my office window and drank my coffee. Then I walked out with a manila folder under my arm. 4 faces turned toward me. Scott's jaw tight, Brenda sitting with her arms crossed, Roy with a relaxed half-smile already in place, Dana moving toward me with her arms open. "Dad, sit down, Dana." She stopped. Something in my voice made her comply. Roy stayed standing, one hand in his jacket pocket, casual. I opened the folder and pulled out the printed transcript. 3 weeks ago, I received a phone call from Beverly Caldwell, the event coordinator from your engagement party. I watched Roy's smile flicker for just a second. She had accidentally captured a conversation on her audio equipment while she was running tests for the toast speeches. A conversation between the two of you on the terrace. Dana's face went still. I started reading directly from the transcript. 6 more months. That's all we need. Once we're married and I'm on the accounts, we push for the sale. Dad, that's not... Dana started. I'm not finished. I kept reading. He's so trusting. He already paid $35,000 for this party. Once the business sells, we're looking at $1.8 million. And with the prenup structured right, the sale money is ours. I set the transcript down and looked at Scott. You want to know what else is on that recording? Scott looked at me warily. Scott has no idea. He thinks he's getting the business someday. Let him keep waiting around. Easy payday. The room went quiet. Scott turned slowly to look at his sister. You said that. Dana's voice came out strained. It was taken completely out of context. Roy and I were just talking through hypothetical scenarios. We weren't actually planning anything. Hypothetically planning to sell my business. Hypothetically divorcing your husband. Hypothetically leaving with the money. I looked at her steadily. That's a very specific hypothetical, Dana. Roy stepped forward, both palms up, the voice he used when he wanted to sound like the reasonable man in the room. Glenn, I understand this recording sounds bad, but you're drawing conclusions from a private conversation. Dana and I love each other. We're building a life together. Whatever you heard, it doesn't represent her name is Dana, I said. Roy stopped, and you called me last week to suggest I retire and sell the company. You already have a buyer. You've had one since before the engagement. I looked at him directly. This wasn't a private conversation. I misunderstood. This was a plan. You came into my family with a plan. Roy's jaw tightened. The reasonable man act dropped about 2 inches. I've created an irrevocable trust, I continued. As of 2 weeks ago, my business, my house, and my savings are fully protected. My attorney has updated all beneficiary designations. After my death, each of you will receive the minimum required under Tennessee law, nothing more. Dana stood up. You can't do that. We're your children. You can't just cut us out. I didn't cut you out. You made your choices. I made mine. Dad, her voice cracked, eyes filling. Please, I know how this looks, but I love you. Whatever you heard on that recording, that's not who I am. Just, please, let's sit down and talk about this like a family. I watched her face, the trembling lip, the tears tracking down perfectly. I had watched my daughter cry since she was 3 years old, and I knew every version of it. I looked at Roy. The engagement is finished. Get out of my house. He stared at me for a long moment. The diplomatic mask was gone now, nothing underneath it but irritation. You're going to regret this, maybe, but I won't regret it as much as I regret that party check. This isn't over, he said. Yes, it is. He grabbed his keys off the side table and walked out. The front door hit the frame hard enough that the window beside it rattled in its track. I turned back to Dana. You have 24 hours to return the $35,000, all of it. If I don't hear from you by tomorrow evening, Patricia Lawson files the paperwork Monday morning. I don't have it. Her voice was barely above a whisper. Roy handled all of it. It went into his accounts. I don't know where it is. Then you have a problem to solve. 24 hours. I walked back to my office and closed the door. For a while I could hear everything, Dana crying, Scott firing questions at her, Brenda's bitter commentary running underneath all of it like a track that wouldn't shut off. Then a door slammed upstairs, then the front door, then nothing. I sat at my desk in the quiet and thought about Lorraine. She would have seen this coming years ago. She always knew which people in our lives were real and which ones were just standing close to something they wanted. I'd been the one who wanted to believe everyone had good intentions. 34 years of building something honest had made me think that was how the world worked. It wasn't, but I was learning. The next 29 days were not quiet. Day 2, I came into my office and knew immediately someone had been through my desk. Nothing taken, but the folders weren't the way I left them. The filing cabinet drawer wasn't fully closed. They'd been looking for the trust documents. I called Patricia that morning, and she told me what I already suspected. Even if they found every piece of paperwork, there was nothing left to challenge. It was done. Locked. Day 5, Scott cornered me in the garage while I was loading equipment into my truck. He stood in the doorway with his arms crossed and said, "Mom would be ashamed of what you're doing to this family." He said it slowly, like he'd been practicing it. I looked at him for a moment. Then I picked up the last toolbox, put it in the truck bed, and drove to the job site. Day 8. Dana showed up with a man she introduced as Dr. Fielding, a psychiatrist, she said, a family friend who just wanted to have a conversation. She stood in my entryway with this carefully arranged expression of worry, explaining that the sudden decisions, the legal changes, the way I'd been acting, it wasn't like me, and she was concerned. I looked at the man, then I looked at my daughter. "I have competency certifications on file with my attorney," I said, "signed by 3 independent physicians. If you pursue this direction, you will fail, and I will file harassment charges the same afternoon." I looked at Dr. Fielding. "I'd think carefully about whose name you want on that filing." He looked at Dana. She looked at the floor. They left. Day 12, Brenda came to my office alone. Knocked on the open door, leaned against the frame. Her voice was softer than I'd ever heard it, almost reasonable. "Mr. Hargrove, I know things have gotten bad between everyone, but Scott is your son. He just needs a little more time. If you could just give us another few months." I looked up from my desk. "Brenda, in 3 years you have never once said please or thank you for anything in this house." "Not once." I held her gaze. "Why start now?" Her face hardened. She left without another word. Day 117. Both front tires on my work truck were slashed in the job site lot overnight. No cameras caught anyone. I had my suspicions, and I kept them in my notes. Day 22. I was in my office when I heard the front door open and close. Then open and close again. Then the low sound of a dolly rolling across the hardwood floor. I looked out the window and watched Scott and Brenda load a U-Haul, box by box, bag by bag. It took them about 2 hours. They'd found something in Antioch. I'd heard Scott mention it on the phone a few days earlier. When the truck was loaded, Scott stood by his car and looked back at the house. Our eyes met through the glass. He held it for a second, then raised his middle finger, got in, and drove away. I closed the blinds and went back to my desk. Day 28, Dana called. The anger was gone from her voice. What was left was something flatter and harder to listen to. "The party money," she said. "I don't have it. Roy kept everything in his personal accounts. He's not returning my calls. He's not returning anyone's calls." I wasn't surprised. Roy had been running a play from the beginning, and when the play fell apart, he moved on. Dana had been part of the plan, not the point of it. "I'm not going to sue you," I said. A long pause. "Why not?" "Because I want you to understand something instead. Roy had a buyer lined up for my company before he ever proposed to you. He knew what the business was worth before he knew your middle name. When the money became unreachable, so did he. Whatever he told you about building a life together, you should think hard about what was real and what wasn't." Silence on her end. "Goodbye, Dana." I hung up. Didn't feel like a victory. Just felt like the last door closing on something that had already been over for a while. Day 30 passed without a word from anyone. The house was quiet in a way it hadn't been in years. I walked through every room that first morning, the living room where Scott had spent 3 years on my couch, the kitchen where Brenda had helped herself to everything without acknowledgement, the guest rooms that now held nothing but furniture and light. All of it mine again. I made coffee and took it out to the back porch for the first time in longer than I could remember. Lorraine and I used to do this, sit out here in the early morning without talking, just watching the yard come into the light. I hadn't been able to make myself do it since she passed. Too quiet, too much of her in it. That morning it felt different. Still hers, but mine too. Patricia called at 9. "Everything is finalized and ironclad, Mr. Hargrove. They have no legal avenue forward. You're fully protected." I thanked her and stayed on the porch after we hung up, just listening to the neighborhood wake up around me. Beverly texted around 10. Still on for coffee this afternoon? We'd met 3 times since that first day in her office. What started as 2 people processing a difficult situation had gradually become something easier, something I hadn't expected. She'd been through her own version of betrayal, rebuilt her life on her own terms. She didn't want anything from me except the hour. That was new. Wouldn't miss it, I typed back. At noon, I drove out to a job training program I'd started volunteering with 2 weeks earlier, teaching basic roofing skills to young guys who needed a trade and a direction. 4 students that day. One of them, a kid named Perry, stayed after to help stack materials without being asked. Just did it. You don't have to do that, I told him. I know, he said. I just figure if someone's giving me their time, least I can do is help clean up. I thought about that on the drive home, about what it meant to actually value someone's time, to show up and contribute without being asked and without expecting anything back. I'd spent 34 years building a business on exactly that principle. Somewhere along the way, I'd stopped applying it to the people I let into my personal life. That was going to change. My phone buzzed pulling into the driveway. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer. Then I did. Dad, Scott's voice, quieter than I'd heard it in years. I know you probably don't want to hear from me. I got a job. Warehouse work over in Smyrna. It's hard, and the hours aren't great, but I'm showing up every day. A pause, and I heard what was on that recording. What Dana said about me. I keep thinking about it. I sat in the driveway with the engine off. I'm not calling to ask for anything, he said. I just wanted you to know. A year ago, I would have told him to come home. Would have had a room ready by the time he pulled in. Would have convinced myself that was love. I'm glad you have work, I said. If you want to have coffee sometime, call me during business hours. We can meet somewhere. That's where I'm at right now. A long pause. Okay, that's fair. His voice was careful, like he was measuring each word. Thanks, Dad. Goodbye, Scott. I sat in the truck for another minute after we hung up. Didn't know if he'd changed. Didn't know if people really could. But I knew that whatever came next was going to happen on my terms, at my pace, with my eyes open. I went inside, put on some music Lorraine used to like, started making dinner for one, which I'd learned to do without feeling sorry for myself about it. The food in the fridge was mine. The chairs at the table were mine. The silence was mine. In the corner of the living room, a fishing rod I'd finally taken out of the garage leaned against the wall. Hadn't used it in 6 years. I'd taken it out twice in the past week, down to the creek off Nolansville Pike at 6 in the morning before the day started. Just sitting there in the quiet, with the line in the water, not needing anything to happen. Turns out, that was enough. 34 years I'd spent building something worth protecting. It took losing the wrong people to finally understand what I'd been building it for. Not for them. For this. The quiet. The morning. The work that actually meant something. I wasn't alone, I was free. The day I stopped being someone's easy payday was the day I finally started living like the life I built actually belonged to me. If this story moved you, please like and share it. Drop a comment below and let me know where you're watching from.